In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to use the loop in expression, which will loop your animation and stop as soon as it reaches the last keyframe. The loop in expression can be very useful when you want to loop an animation over and over again, but have more control when the animation starts and stops on your timeline. For example, maybe I want this animation to loop back and forth from the beginning of my timeline, but I want it to stop when it reaches 15 seconds. So I can apply the loop in expression by pressing the option Alt if you're on Windows, then click on the stopwatch next to position. I'll type in lowercase loop in and open and close parentheses. Now the default loop in expression is double quote cycle, but when you are using the default loop in or default loop out, you do not have to type out cycle. So I'll just erase that. I'll move the CTI back. Tap the spacebar. The animation is happening, but you'll see it stops when it reaches the last keyframe. That's because the loop in expression will loop everything over and over again until the CTI reaches the last keyframe, which is the exact opposite of how the loop out expression works. So if I want this animation to start at the beginning and just repeat over and over again, then stop when the CTI reaches the 15-second mark, well, all I need to do is select all the keyframes and just move the keyframes down until the last keyframe reaches the place where I want the animation to stop, which in this case is the 15-second mark. Now when I drag the CTI back, you'll see the animation is going to work because the loop in is looping everything before the last keyframe. Then once it reaches that last keyframe, you'll see the animation stops. And here we go, and animation stops. Now, if I change loop in to the more familiar and more commonly used loop out expression, so I'll just click, I'll just erase in and replace it with capital OUT. Now when I tap the spacebar, you'll see there is no animation happening before the first keyframe, but the loop out expression says once the CTI reaches this last keyframe, we'll just repeat everything before it over and over again. So I'll just start here so we don't have to go to the beginning. You'll see there's no animation. CTI is going to reach the first keyframe. The animation is going to start, and then it's just going to loop over and over again. So if you have an animation that starts at the beginning of the timeline, such as you see here, it animates through the first and the last keyframe. If you want the animation to continue animating or continue looping and repeating over and over again all the way down your timeline, well, then you would use loop out. So you would press Option or Alt and click on the stopwatch next to the property that you want to add the loop out expression. Type loop out, open and close parentheses. Now when you tap the spacebar, it's going to reach the last keyframe and it's just going to repeat the animation over and over again. Now let's say that you want the exact same animation to start at the beginning, loop or repeat over and over again, only this time you want to tell After Effects when to stop. Let's say you want it to stop at the 10-second mark. Well, then you can change loop out to loop in. Select the keyframes and drag the keyframes so that the last keyframe is where you want the animation to stop. I'll move the CTI to beginning of the timeline, tap the spacebar, and with the loop in expression, it is endlessly looping or repeating the animation until it reaches the last keyframe, and then it will stop. And just like loop out, when using loop in, the default is cycle, but you can also use continue, offset, and ping pong. And that is the loop in expression in Adobe After Effects.